the wrestling television picture. It's slowly coming together. We have got the news that USA Network has mentioned SmackDown debuting on the network Friday, September the 13th. And this week, CW putting out its fall schedule with NXT staying on Tuesday nights when it moves from USA over to the CW. So Tuesdays and Fridays look to be in place. Wade, do you have any prediction on where Raw is going to be? Is Netflix going to just stay with the night of the week that it has always been housed on? Do you give any possibility to Netflix experimenting with Raw on any other night but Monday? And with Netflix now being an NFL partner as well this week.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. I'm predicting it stays on Mondays. I think it's just been so ingrained in a wrestling fan's mind that Monday is the destination. There's benefit to, I think, coming off of a pay-per-view and having that excitement directly bleed over into Raw the next night. I also wonder if the fact that, like, we're talking about Netflix, yes, they're entering live streaming programming, but what matters most in the end is just watch hours. People are watching the show on demand. If you choose to watch it on Monday night, great. If you watch it on Tuesday, you're probably still going to get served ads. So ultimately, does it make that big of a difference for Netflix, whether or not people are watching live?
It's going to be, like that cumulative audience that they have in like a 24-hour span. I think you are aiming for some kind of like live destination programming, but it's not the be-all, end-all that it would be for like a traditional cable network.
Now, let me also ask, though, like, whether or not Netflix chooses to keep Raw on Monday, like, what sort of conversations would they have to have already had with the WWE in order for something like CW to I guess, confidently announce that we're going to keep NXT on Tuesdays? Like, do you think all of this stuff is already in place, or do you think that these conversations between Netflix and WWE are still in negotiation right now?
I would think that they probably have a loose framework of where this is going to be. You have had, I think everyone looks at this as there could always be changes, but I would imagine that they probably have a sense of where things are, with the idea that things could change for them. I think if you put it this way, if you were going to make that drastic change about Raw moving nights, you don't want to be publicizing that now either. Right. But it's
such a jigsaw puzzle, when you're dealing with 3 different networks now.
Well, it's also the touring aspect as well that, I was mildly surprised about SmackDown staying on Fridays. There's the positive of some of these international shows that now you piggyback SmackDown with a Saturday PLE. That has its advantages. But from a touring perspective, be way easier to have SmackDown on a Tuesday, for instance, and your production crew is just going from one city to the next, and you don't have this 4-day gap between TVs. Not to mention, like, NXT to me would have been the most flexible of all of them. It's and that's another question. Like, does NXT start touring when they go to CW? Do they finally get out of the Performance Center? At this point, like we talk about the Apex, and it's like WWE has also found this with NXT. Is like they don't have to worry about selling tickets; they're just collecting their television money and running in front of, I would imagine, the same 300 people almost every single week that are going to these shows.
Right, probably take a significant rights fee increase, right, for them to consider starting touring.
Well, they got one with NXT. They got a nice increase going to CW.
Enough, though, to justify the cost of touring.
I mean, they can afford to tour if they would like. It's a great savings where they are now.
So
put it this way, I will say this, that the negativity towards UFC Apex events, it's pretty pronounced in MMA. You don't hear that same chatter among wrestling fans about the Performance Center having like this awful atmosphere or complaints about the location. So if you're not getting that pushback, then yeah, why incur that cost? And I would definitely question how well they would be able to draw on the road, and you're adding all of these expenses. And I don't think it would change their audience size at all, whether they were doing this in the Performance Center or if they were doing this in like 1,000-seat venue. That maybe some markets they would be able to do 1,000 to 1,500, but that is kind of your level for NXT to be touring.
Yeah. So just maybe going back to Raw and Netflix. Tuesday's off the table now. At least we could see Friday's off the table.
In theory, yes.
The only options remaining would be a Wednesday or Thursday or Monday. Now, do you think Wednesday and Thursdays are viable options for Netflix and Raw?
Yes, I think you could put it on any of those nights of the week. Wednesday, you will. Thursday, you do have Thursday night football, but Monday is Monday night football. I would think you're going against the tougher games on Monday than you are Thursday for, a quarter of the year. And if those are your options, I don't know if there's essentially to me, it would be moving it to a Wednesday. Your idea would be the negative on Monday is Monday night football. Mm-hmm. I think you'd want to get away from football. And that makes Thursday to me a bit of a less why are we making this giant move? And we're still technically going up against football for all these weeks out of the calendar year. And that was my thinking was if Raw ever moved to a Tuesday, for instance, or even another night of the week, if I'm USA, I'm moving SmackDown to Mondays because USA has a proven track record of drawing on Monday nights. And I don't think they would have that same inclination to run away from Monday Night Football. But I would think that the WWE package, I think you can look at it. There's probably a strong likelihood of them staying on their traditional nights. The AEW one is a total guess because we don't know what that deal is going to look like, much less nights of the week. You could just see so many different iterations that I don't think there's a educated guess into what that will look like.
Well, we could probably safely assume that they're hoping that Wednesday is free. And at this point, maybe that looks like it could be likely. And Collision, I think, is probably the other big question. What else is remaining out there when all these other days are taken up?
What an interesting head-to-head that would be if WWE moves something to Wednesday nights, like a Raw, and they could go up against AEW, and we won't even see Raw's ratings. It'll be one-sided.
I'm sure we'll find some other metric to compare and contrast.
I'm very curious how
Google
much
Trends.
Netflix discloses kind of audiences. They put out their charts and such, but
only when there's something to celebrate, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, even the Tom Brady roast, we know that had to have done phenomenal, but it's not like we have gotten really solid data about it, and that just seemed to be the talk of everything last week coming off of that. That seemed to be whatever the cost was for that, and I'm sure it was not cheap to put that together. That was a exercise in just brand superiority of establishing yourself as a go-to place for live comedy, and whoever is willing to do one of those roasts again, it'll be a big deal the next time. But man, you got to get someone that's super famous and has no shame in being in that seat.
Vince McMahon.
I don't know how a roast would go for Vince McMahon these days.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move on.